You know, this game reminds me a lot of an accordion, and not just because I don't think anyone in their right mind should play it. Whoops, there's my opinion spoiled in the first 5 seconds, so if you're just watching this in order to validate your own opinions, you can go ahead and click off the video now. Here, I'll even give you a quick little outro.
When you look at me the way you do.
Alright, they gone? Thank fucking Christ, I hate that guy. Anyways, the reason this game reminds me of an accordion is because it seems to be trying to combine a bunch of different elements from other, better games, and the end result is just this confusing mass that doesn't seem to serve any real purpose, and that prolonged exposure to is probably going to make you bleed out of your fucking ears. Grimm Eclipse is a cooperative hack-and-slash game with MOBA-style micro-progression and combat that feels somewhat like the love child of Dynasty Warriors and Arkham Asylum after a confusing night at Dante's place from Devil May Cry, which, as explanations go, is sort of like hearing someone say they find melting ice cubes with their piss to be incredibly satisfying. It sounds pretty reasonable as long as you don't think about it. I mean, Dynasty Warriors is designed so that your character is able to fight large groups of enemies attacking all at once with large sweeping attacks and combos. The Arkham games have a heavy emphasis on single target attacks and countering at the right time to whittle down large groups of enemies, and Devil May Cry is all about mixing up different attacks and combos to maximize your score. Not to mention that MOBAs have that micro progression system in place because it enhances the PvP element and most matches only last about 20 to 40 minutes. And there's also that pesky little detail that none of the games it seems to be trying to emulate are co-op, which adds an entirely new dynamic to how all of these things need to play off of each other. Okay, yes, technically throwing a bunch of shit together like this is innovative, but that doesn't mean that it's a good idea. Every character has 4 different combos that they can use by mixing heavy and light attacks, but unlike other spectacle fighters like Devil May Cry that let you weave heavy and light attacks together in interesting ways, RWBY's combos are all variations of press X until you press Y. Confusingly, from what I can tell, only one of those combos is AoE in a game where you're primarily going to be fighting large swarms of enemies. Even more confusingly, every single combo has one audio cue assigned to it. And I don't mean that your weapon makes exactly the same sound every single time. Spoiler alert, it does, by the way. I'm saying that the character makes the exact same grunting sound every single time you use the attack, which makes playing with 4 people sound a bit like a Newgrounds animation of 4 WTA champions having an orgy. It's also obnoxious that every single attack combo is a split second of recovery time, and as a result of all this, the combat flows about as well as a 14-year-old white kid making a Minecraft rap parody, which I suppose is just as well because that's the kind of person who'd be watching those Newgrounds animations in the first place. The level and objective design aren't exactly doing the game any favors either. I swear that there are more invisible walls than visible ones in some areas, and I think this game might have set a new record for the amount of times it got stuck on tiny little things in the environment. I don't know, maybe it's just me, but it seems a bit strange that a character who can jump 10 feet in the air and cast ice spells with a sword can't step up a 6-inch curb. It also probably doesn't help that the game runs like an Olympic sprinter with a severe case of narcolepsy, meaning that for the most part it runs just fine. But at seemingly completely random intervals, the game stutters like someone who makes game reviews when they're confronted with a social situation. And it sort of touched on the ear bleeding thing earlier, but I really need to talk about the sound design in this game because it is some of the worst that I have ever fucking heard. And I've watched my own videos, so that is saying something. Much like the 4 main characters, every enemy is one audio cue for all 2 of their attacks, and since you're going to be fighting the same 3 or so enemies for 99% of the game, you're going to wind up pretty intimately familiar with all of them. There's also zero consistency whatsoever in the volume that these sounds are going to be playing at, and I don't really know how to explain this, so I'm just going to show you some unedited footage of the game to give you an idea of what I'm talking about. And that's not even close to the worst of it. There's an area of this game where spikes pop up and down on the floor on platforms that flash and beep to give the player a heads up, which, despite being a somewhat questionable security choice, sounds all well and good, except for the fact that for some reason it is the loudest sound in the entire fucking game. Look, RWBY, I appreciate you thinking of all the blind people who are going to be playing this, but I don't think that Helen Kellering them is the best approach to making the game more accessible. What's even worse than this is the fact that the game expects you to fight off waves of enemies in this area, which, oh boy, you would better enjoy doing if you're going to play this game. Let me give you a quick rundown of the objectives set out for you in the first level of this game. You are dropped into the game and immediately start fighting off a few waves of enemies to unblock an invisible wall so that you can move on to the next area. Upon dropping down to the next area, you fight off a few more waves of enemies so that you can get through a wall of rocks. Once you've done that, you cross a bridge and walk into a cave to find a generator which, surprise surprise, you now have to defend from waves of enemy. Are you starting to understand my point? This game has the padding of a mattress and the depth of a sheet, which is honestly kind of intuitive considering the fact that the combat is going to make most players pass out of sheer fucking boredom. Alright, so we've established that I don't find the gameplay to be fun or engaging, but I've played games before that I loved despite the fact that they played like corrugated assholes. So how does the story stack up? Well, about as well as a Jenga tower in a tumble dryer on the top floor of the World Trade Center. During an earthquake. Poorly, is what I'm trying to say. Every character in this game is so fucking retarded that I'm pretty sure you could make an entire person with all the extra chromosomes there are lying around. Hell, make that character the antagonist, then maybe his motivations would make some semblance of sense. Every character's actions are retarded, their motivations behind these actions are non-existent, and the four main characters don't even really talk to one another. Now, this is probably largely due to the fact that there are so many non-canonical character combinations that you can run, so the game doesn't know how to have the characters interact with one another without giving itself a fucking aneurysm. But that begs the question as to why you'd create this issue for yourself to begin with, especially when the best solution you can come up with is to have every single line of dialogue happen in a vacuum. But again, the game doesn't really make any attempt to have the characters be interesting in their own right. Every one of them only has like 6 lines of dialogue that aren't, hey, we should open that door, and you'll hear every single one of them in no less than 10 times throughout the game when you're fighting off waves of the same 3 enemies over and over again. And despite the fact that the game is about as padded as the helmets that the characters ought to be wearing, it's still shorter than my dick. Oh, I'm sorry, was that joke stale and lazy? Well, what can I say? I'm just feeling inspired right now. You know, I'm very open to the possibility that maybe this game really just isn't for me. But at that point, I have to wonder who it's for to begin with. People unfamiliar with the series are likely going to be put off by the obnoxious combat design, lack of context, and retarded characters, quips, and dialogue, but at the same time, there's so little actual content related to the show, and the story is so completely inconsequential that superfans are probably better off just watching the show again. I mean, hell, you'd probably be better off just reading some fanfiction. It has the same plot relevance as everything going on here, and at least then the grunts would be increasing blood flow to a part of your body that isn't your fucking ears.
When you look